First contact. They appeared on a mundane Wednesday morning in March. One moment Earth's skies were clear, and the next, massive obsidian vessels materialized in low orbit over every major city on the planet. There was no warning, no gradual approach that deep space monitoring stations could detect. The vessels simply appeared, as if they'd always been there, hanging like dark stars against the blue canvas of Earth's sky. Admiral Kira Chen was reviewing troop deployments in the United Nations Space Command headquarters beneath Geneva when the alarms began blaring. Her aide, Lieutenant Torres, burst into the room, face pale and eyes wide. "Admiral, unidentified vessels have appeared in orbit, hundreds of them. They're everywhere." Chen's expression remained impassive as she strode to the command center. The massive display showed Earth from multiple satellite angles, each view dominated by the alien ships. They were perfectly symmetrical, elongated hexagonal structures with no visible propulsion systems or weapons arrays. Their surfaces absorbed light rather than reflected it, creating the impression of voids cut into the sky itself. "Status of the defense grid?" Chen asked, her voice steady despite the chaos erupting around her. "All systems online." But Colonel Yamamoto hesitated. "The vessels are positioned directly above our major population centers. Any aggressive action would risk civilian casualties in the billions. And our space assets. The Luna base and Mars colonies report no contact. The Jupiter mining stations have gone silent." Chen narrowed her eyes. "Get me the Secretary General. And contact Dr. Okafor at Quantum Defense. Tell him it's time." Across the planet, humanity reacted to the arrival with a mixture of terror and fascination. Religious groups declared the end times. Scientists frantically analyzed the limited data available. Military forces worldwide went to high alert. News networks broadcast continuous coverage of the silent vessels. Then came the transmission. Every screen on Earth, from military terminals to civilian phones, displayed the same image: a towering figure with iridescent silver skin and 6 eyes arranged in a perfect hexagon. When it spoke, its voice was melodious yet somehow mechanical, perfectly translated into every human language simultaneously. "People of Earth, we are the Rexian Collective. Your world has been selected for resource extraction and population reduction. Your species has been evaluated and deemed inefficient in your utilization of this planet's resources. This inefficiency will be corrected." In the United Nations emergency session, diplomats and world leaders watched in stunned silence. Serena Patel, Earth's newly appointed Director of Extraterrestrial Diplomacy, a position that had been largely ceremonial until today, stepped forward. "We request peaceful dialogue," she said, her voice remarkably steady. "Earth wishes to establish diplomatic relations with the Rexian Collective." The Rexian representative tilted its head at an unnatural angle. "Dialogue is unnecessary. Efficiency is necessary. Your species will be reduced to a sustainable population of 500 million. The remainder will be processed as biological resources. The extraction begins in 72 hours. The transmission ended. In the silence that followed, Secretary General Mbeki turned to Patel. "Options. They've positioned their vessels to maximize civilian casualties if we attack," Chen interjected before Patel could respond. "Conventional military response is off the table." "Then what do you suggest, Admiral?" Mbeki demanded. Chen exchanged a glance with Patel. "We need time. Dr. Okafor might have something, but he needs at least 48 hours. Patel nodded slowly. "I can buy us time, but I'll need authorization for Protocol Omega." The Secretary General's face drained of color. "That's a deception operation. If they discover it, if we do nothing, billions die in 3 days." Chen cut in. "We're already at extinction-level stakes." After a moment, Mbeki nodded grimly. "Protocol Omega is authorized. God help us all." 12 hours later, Serena Patel stood before the Rexian representative in a hastily established communications center in Geneva. Behind her, teams of analysts monitored every aspect of the alien presence. The United Nations Security Council has authorized me to present our formal response to your proposal, Patel began, choosing her words carefully. We request a phased implementation of your resource extraction plan, beginning with voluntary participation from our population. The Rexians' 6 eyes blinked in unison. Explanation required. Allowing for voluntary processing first will minimize resistance and maximize efficiency, Patel explained, forcing herself to use their cold terminology. We propose a 6-month transition period during which we will prepare our population and infrastructure for your requirements. This is inefficient, the Rexian stated, flatly. On the contrary, Patel countered. A coordinated approach will yield higher quality biological resources and reduce your expenditure of energy in suppressing resistance. We are offering to manage our own harvesting. There was a long pause as the Rexian seemed to commune with some unseen intelligence. Finally, it spoke again. Your proposal has merit. The collective will extend the deadline to 30 of your days for preliminary preparation. Population centers will begin organizing volunteers for processing. Resistance will result in immediate termination of this arrangement. As soon as the communication ended, Patel slumped into a chair, her professional facade cracking to reveal the horror beneath. Did we just agree to help them harvest humanity? Asked her assistant, voice trembling. No, Patel said, straightening. We just bought Dr. Okafor the time he needs. Half a world away, in a facility buried deep beneath the Antarctic ice shelf, Dr. Elias Okafor worked frantically. The cavernous laboratory hummed with energy as thousands of quantum processors calculated probabilities and simulated outcomes. The facility, known only to a handful of world leaders, had been built in secret 20 years earlier after the discovery of an ancient alien vessel frozen in the ice, a discovery that had never been made public. Progress report, demanded Admiral Chen as she entered the lab, having been transported there via the hypersonic tunnel network that connected key strategic facilities around the globe. Okafor looked up from his workstation, his eyes bloodshot from sleeplessness. We've cracked their communication protocols. The quantum entanglement signature is complex but predictable. More importantly, we've identified a critical vulnerability in their shield harmonics. Will it be enough? Chen asked quietly. Okafor's expression was grim. Not with our current weaponry. But that's not our only option. He gestured to a separate section of the facility where engineers worked on sleek, black vessels that looked remarkably similar to the Rexian ships. Project Lazarus is ready. Chen's eyes widened. You finished the reverse engineering. The test flights were scheduled for next year. We accelerated the timeline when we detected quantum disturbances at the edge of the solar system 3 months ago, Okafor explained. The fleet isn't at full capacity, but we have 18 vessels operational with the hybrid drives. And the weapons systems. Okafor allowed himself a small smile. That's where we got lucky. The Rexians use a quantum state offensive system that's vulnerable to the very technology we salvaged from that crash site. Their shields are designed to repel conventional energy weapons, not their own technology. How many can we take out? Chen asked, her military mind already calculating odds. If we coordinate with the ground-based defense grid that we've been disguising as civilian infrastructure for the past decade, Okafor considered, maybe 30% of their fleet in the initial strike. After that, it's going to get messy. Chen nodded slowly. Then we need to make that 30% count. She activated her secure communication device. This is Admiral Chen. Inform the Security Council that Project Lazarus is operational. Begin evacuation protocols for all primary targets under the guise of volunteer processing centers. And get me a direct line to Major Hansen at Lunar Command. Tell her Operation Extinction Protocol is now active. As the false dawn of humanity's apparent surrender unfolded, civilians around the world were directed to massive underground shelters, ostensibly to prepare for processing. The Rexians observed this with cold satisfaction, interpreting it as submission rather than what it truly was, the largest covert military operation in human history. Beneath the surface of compliance, Earth was preparing for war. Operation Defiance. Major Layla Hansen stood on the observation deck of Lunar Command, watching Earth rotate slowly beneath her. From this distance, the Rexian vessels appeared as tiny black specks against the blue sphere. She turned as the communication officer approached. Admiral Chen's transmission, Major. Priority Alpha. Hansen took the encrypted tablet and scanned her retina. The message was brief but unambiguous. Extinction protocol activated. Lazarus assets deployed. Coordinate lunar artillery barrage with Phase 1 timing. She handed the tablet back and turned to her executive officer. Sound General Quarters. Wake the sleepers. We're at war. Throughout the sprawling lunar facility, officially designated as a scientific research station, but secretly housing Earth's most powerful long-range weapons, alarm klaxons blared. Personnel who had been in cryostasis for the potential emergency were revived and rushed to battle stations. The lunar base had been humanity's insurance policy for decades, hidden from Earth's own population, and, they hoped, from any watching eyes among the stars. Its primary weapon, the graviton cannon, could manipulate gravity itself to tear apart ships from the inside. But its massive power requirements meant it could only be fired 3 times before requiring a complete reactor rebuild. Status of the graviton cannon, Hansen demanded. Charged and ready, Major. Targeting solutions for the largest vessels over each major continent are locked in. And the kinetic impactors, all rails loaded. Mass drivers at maximum capacity. Hansen nodded grimly. Synchronize all attacks with the Lazarus fleet emergence. The Rexians won't know which way to look when we hit them from all sides. Back on Earth, in shelters disguised as processing centers, civilians found themselves greeted not by the expected alien harvesters, but by military personnel distributing emergency supplies and tactical instructions. Special operations teams had infiltrated every major shelter, explaining to bewildered citizens that they were now part of Earth's last-ditch resistance plan. In Washington, D.C., President Eleanor Carter addressed the hastily assembled resistance leaders in a bunker 300 meters beneath the White House. For decades, we've prepared for this possibility, she explained, her voice steady despite the enormous pressure. Since the Antarctic discovery in 2037, we've known that we might not be alone, and that our visitors might not be friendly. Every major nation contributed resources and personnel to create a unified defense plan that transcended our political differences. She gestured to the tactical display, showing the distribution of Rexian vessels worldwide. What the Rexians see as submission is actually our preparation for the most coordinated military strike in human history. While they believe we're organizing for harvesting, we're positioning our forces to hit them simultaneously from ground, space, and, she paused for effect, from vessels using their own technology against them. On the Antarctic ice shelf, now cleared of its research station cover, the first of Earth's secret fleet rose from a massive hangar concealed beneath the ice. The vessel, designated Defiance, was a sleek black arrowhead 300 meters in length. Its hull comprised of materials reverse-engineered from the crashed alien ship discovered 2 decades earlier. 17 similar ships emerged across the globe from hidden bases in the Mariana Trench, the Sahara Desert, and the Amazon Basin. Admiral Chen took command from the Defiance's bridge, surrounded by a crew of the most elite pilots and weapons specialists Earth had to offer. All Lazarus vessels report ready, Admiral, her tactical officer reported. Chen nodded, her expression resolute. Initiate Phase 1. Deploy the TUED. Throughout Earth's orbit, seemingly ordinary satellites suddenly activated dormant systems. These quantum entanglement disruptors had been disguised as weather and communication satellites, placed over decades as part of regular space missions. When activated simultaneously, they created a quantum field that temporarily severed the Rexians' instantaneous communication network. On the Rexian command vessel hovering over Geneva, Overseer Vex felt the disruption immediately. For the first time in its 700-cycle existence, it experienced something close to surprise as the perfect harmony of the collective stuttered. "Communication disruption detected," reported a subordinate. "Unknown technology interfering with quantum entanglement." "Impossible," Vex stated flatly. Their technological assessment indicated no quantum manipulation capabilities. Before the subordinate could respond, warning signals flashed across their control interfaces. From the dark side of Earth's moon, massive projectiles launched at incredible speeds, accelerated by electromagnetic rails to a significant fraction of light speed. Simultaneously, gravity itself seemed to distort around 3 of the largest Rexian vessels as the lunar graviton cannon fired. The Rexians' superior technology should have easily countered these attacks, except their defensive systems relied on the very quantum communication network that had been temporarily disabled. The kinetic impactors slammed into dozens of ships, the pure force of their velocity enough to rupture hulls even through partially functioning shields. The 3 vessels targeted by the graviton cannon imploded spectacularly, crushed by artificially generated gravitational forces that their internal systems couldn't counteract quickly enough. Multiple vessels compromised, the subordinate reported, its voice still mechanically even despite the chaos. Defensive grid reestablishing. Communication network recalibrating to bypass interference. Vex processed this information rapidly. The humans possess unanticipated defensive capabilities. Adjust harvesting timeline. Begin immediate population reduction protocols. But before these orders could be implemented, new contacts appeared on the Rexian sensors. Rising from Earth's surface came 18 vessels of unmistakably Rexian design, yet clearly not part of their fleet. "Impossible," Vex repeated, this time with a faint harmonic of alarm in its voice. "How have they acquired our technology?" The answer came in the form of devastating energy pulses that erupted from the Earth vessels, precisely calibrated to the frequency vulnerabilities of Rexian shields. Where the kinetic weapons had caused damage through brute force, these weapons slipped through the Rexians' defenses like they weren't even there. Aboard the Defiance, Admiral Chen watched as the first coordinated attack unfolded. Status report: 27 enemy vessels destroyed, 43 severely damaged, reported her tactical officer. Lunar Base reports successful deployment of all kinetic weapons and all 3 graviton cannon shots. And our fleet. All ships reporting minimal damage. Their point defense systems weren't calibrated for our hybrid technology. Chen allowed herself a moment of satisfaction before refocusing. They'll adapt quickly. Begin Phase 2 before they can reorganize. Phase 2 involved Earth's ground-based defenses. For years, what appeared to be ordinary radio telescopes, weather stations, and energy plants had concealed components of a planetary defense grid. Now these installations revealed their true purpose, firing concentrated electromagnetic pulses at the Rexian vessels still reeling from the initial attack. In orbit, the Rexian fleet began to recover, adapting their shields to the new threats. Several Earth vessels took direct hits as the aliens adjusted their weapons, but the hybrid technology Okafor had developed provided unexpected resilience. On the Rexian command ship, Overseer Vex analyzed the situation with growing concern, an emotion the collective rarely experienced. "The humans are utilizing precursor technology," it stated, referring to the ancient spacefaring civilization that had preceded even the Rexians. Analysis of their vessels confirms components consistent with precursor design principles. "How is this possible?" asked a subordinate. "Unknown." Priority query: how extensively have they integrated this technology? Secondary query: what other capabilities have they concealed? As if in answer to these questions, a new threat emerged. From shelters worldwide, millions of civilian volunteers deployed small drone devices that rose into the atmosphere, creating a swarm that surrounded the remaining Rexian vessels. Individually, these drones posed minimal threat, but collectively, they formed a communications jamming field that further isolated the alien ships from one another. Dr. Okafor, monitoring the battle from his Antarctic facility, smiled grimly as his citizen-deployed countermeasure unfolded according to plan. The drones are successfully disrupting their secondary communication attempts, he reported to Chen via secure channel. Their ships are operating as individuals now, not as a collective. This was the key vulnerability they had identified. The Rexians functioned as a hive mind, their strength coming from perfect coordination. Without it, they were still formidable, but no longer overwhelmingly superior. As the battle raged across Earth's orbit, Major Hansen coordinated the lunar forces for a second strike. The railguns, though less powerful than the now depleted graviton cannon, continued launching precision projectiles at key weak points on damaged Rexian vessels. They're adjusting formation, her sensor officer reported, consolidating their forces over the Atlantic. Hansen narrowed her eyes. They're preparing a counterattack. Alert Admiral Chen. On the Defiance, Chen received the warning just as her own tactical team reached the same conclusion. They're gathering their remaining ships into a defensive sphere, her XO reported. Energy readings suggest they're pooling resources for a major weapons discharge. Chen studied the tactical display. Target their command vessel before they can complete the formation. All ships, converging attack pattern Omega. Earth's hybrid fleet moved with practiced precision, executing a maneuver that scattered the Rexian defensive sphere before it could fully form. The Defiance led the assault on the command ship, firing a concentrated burst from its main weapon, a modified version of the alien's own quantum disruption technology. On the Rexian vessel, Overseer Vex watched with something approaching disbelief as the humans executed battle strategies that shouldn't have been possible with their level of technology. We have underestimated them, it stated, significantly. As the Defiance's weapon struck the command ship, Vex made a decision that no Rexian overseer had made in thousands of cycles. Initiate strategic withdrawal. The human world requires reassessment, but the humans had anticipated this possibility. As the Rexian vessels attempted to activate their faster-than-light capabilities, they discovered another trap. The quantum field generated by Earth's satellites had been specifically calibrated to disrupt not just communications, but the precise frequency needed for their propulsion systems. The battle had reached its turning point, but both sides knew it was far from over. The Rexians still possessed significant firepower, and now, with escape temporarily impossible, they had nothing to lose. Overseer Vex's 6 eyes narrowed as it reassessed the situation. If we cannot depart, we will ensure the humans have no victory to celebrate. Prepare the extinction protocol. The final stand. Dr. Elias Okafor's eyes widened as he stared at the data streaming across his monitors. Admiral Chen, we're detecting a massive energy buildup in the remaining Rexian vessels. The pattern matches theoretical models for a quantum cascade reaction. In English, Doctor, Chen demanded, her voice tense as the Defiance maneuvered to avoid concentrated fire from 3 Rexian ships simultaneously. They're linking their reactors to create a chain reaction. If successful, it will generate an explosion comparable to a small supernova. Earth's atmosphere will be stripped away. There was a moment of stunned silence on the Defiance's bridge before Chen responded, her voice deadly calm. Time to detonation. Approximately 23 minutes. They need to synchronize their reactor cores precisely. Chen's mind raced through options, discarding one after another. Can we disrupt the synchronization with another QED burst? Negative, Okafor replied. They've adapted their shielding. Our current QED technology can't penetrate it. Chen made her decision. All ships, new priority target. We need to disable those reactors before they synchronize. Coordinate with Lunar Command for precision strikes, and get me President Carter. As Earth's fleet regrouped for this desperate final phase, the Rexian vessels formed a tight defensive formation, their remaining ships protecting those engaged in the synchronization process. Despite the damage they had sustained, their firepower remained formidable. In Washington, President Carter received Chen's transmission with grave concern. You're certain about this quantum cascade? Dr. Okafor confirms it. Madam President, we have less than 20 minutes. Carter turned to her Joint Chiefs. Options. The Lazarus fleet is our best chance, General Williams replied. But they'll need to get close, dangerously close, to disable those reactors. And if they fail? Williams' expression was grim. We've been developing a last resort option. Project Mantle. It's untested. And he hesitated. The collateral damage to Earth would be severe. What kind of collateral damage are we talking about? Carter demanded. The project would trigger simultaneous volcanic eruptions at strategic points around the globe. The resulting ash cloud would potentially block the quantum cascade effect from stripping our atmosphere, but it would also trigger a volcanic winter that could last for years. Carter closed her eyes briefly. Prepare Project Mantle as a contingency, but hold for my direct authorization. Admiral Chen has priority to resolve this with the fleet. In orbit, the battle intensified. Earth's vessels executed increasingly desperate maneuvers to break through the Rexian defensive perimeter, taking heavy damage in the process. 2 of the Lazarus ships were completely destroyed, their crews lost in brilliant explosions that momentarily lit up Earth's skies. On the lunar surface, Major Hansen coordinated with her remaining assets. The railguns can't penetrate their current formation, she reported to Chen. But we have another option. The mass driver. The mass driver was the Moon's largest electromagnetic accelerator, designed to launch mining payloads to the outer solar system. Repurposing it as a weapon would require precise calculations and, more problematically, a significant payload. What are you proposing as the projectile? Chen asked. Hansen's response was steady. Lunar Base Secundus, Admiral. The auxiliary facility. Chen understood immediately. The auxiliary base, a smaller installation several kilometers from the main lunar command, could be detached from its foundations and effectively turned into a massive kinetic weapon. That base is still manned, Major. Volunteer skeleton crew only, Hansen replied. They're aware of the stakes. After a moment's hesitation, Chen gave the authorization. Proceed, Major, and tell those volunteers that Earth won't forget their sacrifice. As the Lunar Command prepared this desperate measure, aboard the Defiance, Admiral Chen gathered her remaining officers. Their ship had taken significant damage, with multiple systems failing and casualty reports mounting. The direct approach isn't working, she acknowledged. We need something unexpected. Dr. Okafor, you know their technology better than anyone. What would they never anticipate? Okafor, coordinating from Antarctica, but linked via quantum-secure communications, considered the question. The Rexians operate on pure logic and efficiency. They wouldn't understand a sacrificial strategy that appears irrational. Such as deliberate reactor breaches of our own vessels, Okafor suggested reluctantly. If precisely calculated, the energy release could disrupt their synchronization without triggering the cascade. Chen studied the tactical display, noting the position of her damaged ships relative to the Rexian formation. How many ships would we need to sacrifice? 3, minimum. Positioned at these coordinates. Okafor transmitted the data. Chen nodded gravely. I'll take the Defiance as one. Request volunteers for the other 2. Her XO started to protest, but Chen cut him off. The command crew stays with the ship, Commander. That's final. Order non-essential personnel to evacuation pods. On the tactical network, 2 ship captains immediately volunteered their already damaged vessels for the mission. The plan took shape rapidly. 3 Earth ships would execute hypervelocity runs directly at the Rexian formation, deliberately overloading their hybrid reactors at precisely calculated points to disrupt the quantum synchronization. Simultaneously, the repurposed lunar base would be launched as a massive kinetic impactor, timed to strike immediately after the reactor disruptions when the Rexian shields would be at their weakest. 14 minutes to quantum cascade completion. Okafor reported, his voice tense. In the White House bunker, President Carter monitored the unfolding events with her finger hovering over the authorization for Project Mantle. If Chen's desperate gambit failed, they would have only moments to implement the volcanic contingency. On the Rexian command vessel, Overseer Vex observed the human fleet's movements with analytical precision. 3 vessels are approaching on attack vectors. Predictable desperation. Their trajectories indicate kamikaze runs. A subordinate reported, using the human term it had extracted from Earth's historical databases. Irrelevant. Their kinetic impact will be insufficient to disrupt our shields at current power levels. Vex responded. Maintain focus on synchronization. 11 minutes to completion. What the Rexian Overseer failed to anticipate was that the human vessels weren't planning simple kinetic impacts. As the Defiance and its 2 companion ships accelerated toward the alien formation, they precisely modulated their reactor outputs to create quantum harmonic patterns that would resonate with the Rexians' own power signatures. On the Defiance's bridge, Admiral Chen strapped herself into her command chair as warning lights flashed across every console. Reactor at 130% capacity and climbing, her engineering officer reported. Containment fields failing. Maintain course, Chen ordered calmly. Synchronize reactor modulation with Beta and Gamma ships. As the 3 Earth vessels reached the perimeter of the Rexian formation, they were met with concentrated fire. The ship designated Gamma took a direct hit to its propulsion system, veering off course. Gamma is compromised. Chen's tactical officer shouted. Chen made an instantaneous decision. Accelerate the sequence. Execute reactor breach now. The Defiance's hybrid reactor core, already pushed far beyond safety limits, released its contained energy in a precisely calculated pattern. The vessel designated Beta did the same seconds later. The resulting quantum disruption rippled through space in an invisible wave that slammed into the Rexian ships like a tsunami. On the command vessel, Overseer Vex experienced true alarm as synchronization patterns collapsed across the fleet. Impossible. They've created a quantum harmonic disruption using our own frequency patterns. In that moment of disruption, the massive projectile that had once been lunar base Secundus struck the heart of the Rexian formation at tremendous velocity. The kinetic energy released was catastrophic, destroying the command vessel and 4 surrounding ships instantly. The synchronized reactor chain was broken, the quantum cascade averted. But the battle wasn't over. Several dozen Rexian vessels remained operational, their weapon systems still capable of devastating Earth's surface. Admiral Chen had anticipated this. The Defiance, its reactor breached, but its command systems still partially functional, transmitted final targeting data to Earth's remaining defense grid. As escape pods launched from the dying vessel, Chen remained at her post, coordinating the last phase of the counterattack. From the Antarctic facility, Dr. Okafor watched as Chen's life signs weakened. Admiral, you need to evacuate now. Negative, Doctor, came the calm reply. Someone needs to ensure these coordinates are precise. The Defiance's systems are failing, but I can manual override. On the tactical display, Okafor could see what Chen was attempting. She was using the Defiance's remaining maneuvering thrusters to position the dying ship as a final guided weapon, aimed at the largest remaining cluster of Rexian vessels. It's been an honor, Elias, Chen said, using his first name for the first time in their years of collaboration. Kira, Okafor began, but the transmission cut off as the Defiance made its final approach. The Admiral's sacrifice was not in vain. The precise positioning of the Defiance's remains, combined with the coordinated fire from Earth's defense grid and the remaining Lazarus vessels, created a killing zone that trapped the surviving Rexian ships. In the White House bunker, President Carter watched as the tide decisively turned. "Stand down, Project Mantle," she ordered, relief evident in her voice. "It looks like we won't need to destroy our planet to save it." The final phase of the battle was swift and decisive. Without their command structure, and with their quantum synchronization disrupted, the remaining Rexian vessels fought individually, powerfully, but without the perfect coordination that made them so formidable. Earth's forces, though battered and diminished, pressed their advantage relentlessly. 3 hours after Admiral Chen's sacrifice, the last Rexian ship was disabled, its reactor core ejected into space to prevent any possibility of detonation near Earth. As dawn broke over a planet that had come terrifyingly close to extinction, humanity began to assess what had happened. And what came next? The victory had been costly. Millions of civilians had died in the initial Rexian attacks before the counteroffensive could be launched. Much of Earth's infrastructure lay in ruins. The secret fleet that had saved them was reduced to 7 operational vessels. Yet in the ashes of this first interstellar war, something remarkable emerged. Nations that had been enemies for generations found themselves united by the shared experience of fighting for survival. The technology salvaged from the Rexian vessels promised advances that would have taken centuries to develop independently. 1 week after the battle, President Carter addressed a global audience from the partially rebuilt United Nations headquarters. Today, we stand as one people, not Americans or Chinese, Russians or Brazilians, but Earthers. Together, we faced an enemy that sought to harvest us like crops, and together we demonstrated that humanity will never submit to tyranny, whether it comes from our own world or from the stars. She paused, her expression solemn. Admiral Kira Chen, Major Layla Hansen, and countless others gave their lives to ensure our survival. We will honor their sacrifice by building a world worthy of their courage, and by preparing for what lies beyond our atmosphere. The Rexians were defeated, but they are unlikely to be the only spacefaring civilization in our galaxy. Next time, we will be ready. In the Antarctic facility, now the center of Earth's rebuilding efforts, Dr. Okafor stood before the hybrid vessel that had been under construction when the invasion began. Larger and more advanced than even the Defiance, it incorporated everything they had learned from the ancient crashed ship and the recent battle. Serena Patel joined him, her diplomatic skills now focused on unifying Earth's fractious nations into a coherent spacefaring civilization. "What will you call it?" she asked, gesturing to the massive ship. Okafor's response was immediate. "The Chen." As they stood in contemplation, an alert sounded from the quantum communications array, the system designed to monitor for any return of the Rexians. But the signal it detected wasn't Rexian in origin. "New contact," reported a technician, excitement in his voice. "Quantum signature doesn't match anything in our database." On the main screen, a message appeared in multiple Earth languages. "People of Earth, the Galactic Confederation acknowledges your successful defense against the Rexian collective. Your species has proven its sovereignty. We offer diplomatic contact." Patel and Okafor exchanged glances, both understanding that humanity's true journey to the stars was just beginning. Earth had said no to extinction, and yes to its place among the stars, a place it had earned through courage, sacrifice, and the unbreakable will to survive. The extinction,